So next, I'd like to welcome Lou Leonard to lead us in a moment of spiritual reflection and spiritual pause. Lou is let me get this right, he's the Senior Vice President of the World Wildlife Fund, based in Washington, D.C. I think that's correct. And Lou is also the co-founder of One Earth Sangha, which is a Buddhist organization that works on climate change. One Earth Sangha is one of the key partners for this initiative, and Lou's colleague, Kristen, who may be watching online, I hope she is. Kristen Barker has been very much involved in the developing of the day here and in the drafting of the statement. So Lou, I'd love to invite you up to the front to share something with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to experiment standing with only my 2 feet underneath me and see what happens. Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for welcoming me at the end of your day. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to be with you for the full part of your day, and for that reason, not able to benefit from what I can tell for the last hour and a half or so that I've been here has been a really rich conversation. Maybe I'll start with something that I hope is inspirational, and that is what kept me from being here earlier was the opening of something called the U.S. Climate Action Center today. So for the first time, and it's probably not going to be a surprise to you that this was the case, but for the first time, the United States government did not host a center at one of these talks to share stories about what's happening in the United States on climate action. So a number of groups, including my day job at WWF, worked together to host a U.S. Climate Action Center. So we opened it this afternoon, and it'll be, thank you. It'll have programming all week, but this morning we launched with a wonderful session that was opened by the Fijian champion for climate action. So brought some of that realness about how this issue is hitting the ground in the world of the most vulnerable, but also a really inspiring message about the power that we all have beyond governments, beyond national governments, to drive change. And in fact, that's part of what's invited in the Paris Agreement. In fact, the Paris Agreement calls for that leadership. So we had a whole host of mayors and corporate executives and university leaders and faith leaders. We had Bishop Mark Andrus from the Episcopal Church in California there, sharing stories with the rest of the world gathered there, and we were live streaming it to say, as Americans, what happens in Washington is not telling the whole story about climate action, and everyone was there to say we are still in. So it was really inspiring. So I wanted to just say a couple things about my own personal journey. When I was asked to come and speak and share today, I felt a little bit awkward about coming late and coming at the end and standing up as this white guy from a big, northern environmental group, wanting to really somehow close out your day and share some wisdom with you that you have not already gone over this ground and probably much further over the course of your day today. But I thought the best thing that I could do is just share a little bit of my own journey, that my own spiritual journey, and how it has led me to practices related to sustainable consumption, and some of the challenges that I still face, and the path that I took, that I have taken so far to get there. And I'll try to do that in 6 minutes or 5 minutes. I think for me, I began my life in a family that was very religious, a Catholic family, Irish Catholic sort of immigrant family that very culturally, as well as sort of in the spiritual practices, identified with that faith, and it was very transformative or maybe not transformative, it was formative in my early years of instituting a sense of social justice and individual responsibility. I left that tradition in college as I got more engaged in the world and had this sense that the Catholic Church, at least at that time, as a political institution, was not aligned with the values and the goals that I saw in my life. And for a long time, I was not a spiritual person at all, and I developed this, what turned out to be a very poisonous sense of faith in me as the actor that if I just worked hard enough and if I just was hard enough on myself, drove myself hard enough, that I could make a really significant contribution to issues like sustainability and later climate change, and that approach to life really created a sort of a bottoming out, a burning out, a cratering in 2010, actually, after the failed Copenhagen climate talks and the quest to get a climate law in the United States. Those were my first 2 years at WWF. I had been an environmentalist and in the movement for a long time, but had taken on climate change just a couple of years before, and really, I just worked myself to the point where I was sick, because that was all that I knew how to do. Right, that was my only theory of change. Was if I worked hard enough and if I was hard enough on myself and if I hated myself enough to push myself hard enough, that would somehow produce the results that we needed, and it didn't. And what I realized was I was that my view of the problem and my view of the solution was so narrow because it was so focused on my sense that I could do it all. Not only that I could, but I had to. So since then, it really, the last 7 years since I've come to Buddhism and begun to integrate my spiritual path with my activist path, it's been this path of self-care, of self-compassion, and in the process then having this wider heart that could help come at the challenges that we face from a totally different place. And I look around, and you guys know this, right? Because this is who you are too. But I had to learn it, the really hard way. So part of that path back, and that those practices of self-care, then led me to ritual. To daily practices that allowed me to tap into that sense of interconnection and bigger than myself that was so part of my my journey back, and things like food practice began to be a big part of that. Just stopping as I went before every meal, kind of looking deeply at what was in front of me, trying to imagine what it took to get it from where it started in the dirt to where it ended up in my bowl or on my plate or whatever, and just looking really deeply. And that's one of the things that my practice has allowed me to do, look deeply inside, but also then to look and see deeply out in the rest of the world. And so there's been many ways in which my spiritual practice has really sort of helped and supported this path. I think one of the ways that it that my natural wiring continues to sort of rear itself up in this path, and I think is one challenge of this kind of work, is to remain really connected in the big systemic issues while we do the individual sustainable consumption practice. So we don't let it confuse us as to the way that that these issues are interwoven into so much of the systems that are beyond our control, as well as there of course are ways in which it is, that there are parts that are within our control and that give us some of that agency that someone mentioned earlier. So I wanted to kind of end with just a couple of thoughts about challenges in this, as we at One Earth Sangha, which I co-founded and am lucky to really be the very, very, very far backseat driver with my partner Kristen Barker, is to try to bring these values of the Buddhist practice of reflection, self-compassion, self-care, an understanding of the interconnection of the world into a place that looks more like activism. And that's a challenge that we face within at least the parts of the Buddhist community that I'm involved in. As I sort of indicated before, we get very attached to our cushion. So I think that, that's one of the things that we face with this initiative, because it's going to ask a lot of people individually. I think another challenge that we're going to face gets to this question of ensuring that we maintain a balance between the systemic and the individual practice as we do this. We don't have the messages of this work undermine other messages that we know need to be out there about the systemic change that we need. And I think that that on our side at Wonder Sangha, we're also going to, we're going to have this conversation within our community, and we're going to try to cultivate as much wisdom as we can from all of the folks who are doing this work under the campaign. And I think, as it is for so many things, the Buddha talks about the middle way between greed and hatred and the emotions that can pull us to one extreme or another. But I think the middle way here between individual practice and systemic change, and what I've noticed in my own practice, and I think maybe I'll end here, is the value that can be gained from trying to do both of these things and moving back and forth between the systemic and the individual. And what I notice is the more that I do individual practice, the more I allow my heart to reach out to others and to feel like it's part of this bigger push, the more I want to do the individual work, the more I want to live fully into the values that I'm espousing that the larger system should adopt. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to, and we at Wonder Sangha are looking forward to working with you all on this initiative, is how we can develop those practices, develop those messages, develop that way of being responsible without taking on too much of the responsibility ourselves, so that we can also call for the broader change that we know we need. So thank you for bringing this initiative to us, for asking us to be part of it, and for doing all the hard work that we're all going to need in order to be successful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lou. Thank you for coming down from the fantastic launch. I'm sure we'll all read about that in the press tomorrow.